Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley, and this is another church in Worcestershire. This is the Church of St Leonard, Clent. The Clent Hills are a noted area of natural beauty, not very far from Bromsgrove. And St Leonard's is set in the midst of these hills. It's a building with 12th century origins, as far as I can tell. Restored, of course, in the 19th century, but also there appears to be some 14th and 15th century work here. So, as usual, have a look around. You can see here it's a nice, big, well, big-ish church. There's aisles. It's built into the side of a hill, which is why the chancel is quite a lot higher than the nave. Now, the Victorians like that kind of thing. They like the idea of the high altar literally being up half a dozen steps. But here it's genuinely part of the medieval setup. There are some places you go there and you say, well, hang on a minute, the sedilia and piscina are near the floor, they're completely unusable, someone's raised the floor level. Not here. Here they've used the lie of the land to get quite a tall chancel. So, as usual, have a look around and again see what there is to be seen. So, as usual, we start at the west end. You can see here we are right by the tower screen, and if we pan over this way, we've got the south aisle. You notice that internal porch. There's actually an external porch as well, but it gets pretty cold here in the winter, even now, and of course, in the past, it got even colder. And there we have the north aisle. This has been either completely rebuilt or added. In the Victorian era, you can see those Victorian columns, and you note those, essentially those bands around the columns. What they support are not, as far as I can tell, not light bulbs. No, they're candlesticks, so that's for when they use their candles. And the organ is at the back of the north aisle, quite a common place to find them. The south aisle here, the font is by the door. Normal place to find the font, of course, the location by the door suggests the idea of baptism as being the entry into the church in some way. Of course, quite how that's understood depends on the churchmanship in question. We have here a very typical Anglican window here. This is your baptistry window. You've got the baptism of the Lord by John, who I don't think we're standing in quite just a shallow piece of water, at least looking at up to the knee is minimum. And then you've got Christ receiving little children, which of course nothing to do with baptism, but to do with allowing the children to be brought to Christ. So here we have, of course, Mary and Martha. Martha has her keys because Martha, as far as we can tell, was the lady who essentially acted as the mistress of the house. The suggestion then is that Lazarus wasn't married. We've got here, that's a nice, probably late 12th century column. You do occasionally find these in the 13th century. That kind of capital and that well carved suggests that this is indeed 12th century. And we've got here a nice south chapel, the Lady Chapel. This is something that's quite common. It's a Coalbrookdale version of Leonardo's Last Supper. They were made at, say, Coalbrookdale in Shropshire, and they were mass produced, and a lot of churches bought them, and some people also got them for private houses. You'll sometimes find them as reredosses, or set in the reredos in a small country church. We have here the peace window. You can see there you've got man under his own vine with his children and his wife. And the idea, this is peace. This is to the glory of God and in commemoration of the signing of peace on June the 28th, 1919, which of course meant basically 20 years of relative peace in Europe, and that was it. Piscina, the bowl has been cut away here after the Reformation, and what that allowed was for something to be put in front of it. and also meant that the side chapel was taken out of use, because the idea of these side chapels in a medieval church is for saying the Mass. And if what you're doing is you're changing a medieval Catholic church into a more Protestant setup, you stop having these side chapels. This is the Mother's Union banner. You can see there's St. Leonard kneeling before the Virgin and Child, very typical. There's this nice eagle lectern, and the pulpit, all of which looks to be either late 19th or early 20th century. It's hard to tell the difference. And here we are, there's those stairs up to the high altar. East window, no stained glass, which is interesting given the stained glass in the south aisle, and given there is some stained glass in the north. We have here a window with some of the miracles of Christ. We've got the healing of the blind man, we've got raising of Lazarus, and we've got the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes. So probably the feeding of the 5,000, because normally people don't do it of the lesser known feeding of the 4,000. And the organ was once at the east end here, and then that's the vestry within, and what they've done is they turned that into a sort of kitchen area, which is quite a common thing to do. And the idea is you can then have refreshments in there, and it makes for a more flexible space without taking out all the pews. And there we have up into the chancel, and it is, yes, very much up into the chancel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 6th step is that one there. And various memorials. And this is definitely medieval stonework. It would have been plastered, but the plaster's been taken off. The stonework's not too rubbish, but it's not too great either. Quite common memorials here for here's Thomas Leal, Lieutenant Royal Navy. And formerly commander of the can't see what it says there, but he was in an East Indiaman, and then he went into the Navy, and then he died 17th March 1790, aged 38. And there's Elizabeth Leal, and here we have the Reverend Adolphus Hopkins, M.A., vicar of this parish, who by God's grace, with eminent and uniform consistency, devoted himself for upwards of 34 years to the work of the ministry, watching over his whole flock with affection, labouring amongst them with diligence and wisdom, exhorting and warning them with tenderness and faithfulness, not shunning to declare to them the whole counsel of God, especially preaching Christ crucified, in whom he believed and rejoiced, and commending them to the guidance of that Holy Spirit, to whom he ever looked as the author of all godliness, and to whose sanctifying influence his own life bore witness. He was born the 31st of August, 1797, ordained deacon and licensed the curacy of this parish 25th July 1823, and by a sudden call summoned into the presence of the Lord, whom having not seen he loved, 19th of January 1855, monument erected in grateful affection by his sorrowing parishioners. It's a good evangelical man there, by the sound of it. Some of the language there is the language you wouldn't expect with someone who was just a sort of normal, middle-of-the-road Anglican clergyman. We've got memorials to members of the Amphlett family here, Bit of lettering there, hard to read, but there we are. And here we have the church banner, you know, the broken chains, because St Leonard is reputed to have, but one of the things he did was he set slaves free, which of course is a thoroughly Christian thing to do, and so he is the patron saint to setting the captives free. And there we have, looking down from the chancel, it's a very nice country church, sort of, well, medium-sized country church. There we have the inside, so we'll have a look on the outside next. So here we are outside at Clent, and you can see behind me here, so you can see behind me the chancel, and then behind my head is the tower. The east window here is 15th century, and the tower appears to be at the same date. It's quite common to find towers either built for the first time or rebuilt at that time. It's to do with, well, to some extent it's to do with money, and everything else is likely to have been done already, and then someone leaves some money and says we need a tower on our church. We've got pollen coming off the evergreens here, so I've got to be careful. And there goes the bell, that's past. So it's the outside, and let's have a look around, see what we can see. So here we are, this is the chancel. You can see a lot of 15th century work. I would say this is 15th century chancel, given that all the stonework I can see is of that day. You see that very nice priest's door. The priest would have his own door to get in for various reasons. That aisle there's obviously been rebuilt partially in the 19th century, and then there's that nice 15th century tower. So there's obviously a bit of money around here in the 15th century if they're rebuilding the chancel and adding a tower. Both of these, of course, 15th century, Middle Ages, you're very much in that period when what you were expected to do, if you were rich, you would leave a big legacy to the church, and the idea was that this would help you to get out of purgatory quicker, because of course medieval church very much believes in the reality of damnation, but at the same time you've got this idea of purgatory, that most people when they die, they're not good enough, they've still got a lot of work left to do on them before they go to heaven, and so they've got to go somewhere else to have all that cleansing done. That's purgatory. There we are, that looks like the modern toilet block, and that's actually quite nice, that little structure. It's made of the same local stone as the rest of the building, so it'll weather down to a consistent appearance, fairly consistent even now. And that chapel appears to be Victorian, which doesn't surprise me because, of course, when I say chapel, the old vestry is Victorian. You can tell it's the old vestry because it's got that chimney out of it. And the aisle, of course, is also Victorian. So we've got this nice Victorian building on this side, and the medieval church would only have had the one aisle probably, because there's no, well, I would expect that if there had been another aisle they'd have kept the arcade rather than build a new one, but they didn't, which, well, there is no retained arcade that side, which suggests that there never was an arcade on that side. We're not actually all that far from Birmingham here, but it is very, very rural and quite a posh area, of course, because again, if you go to a very rural area near a there's a village pub. There's the War Memorial. You've got it, and there's the village gate. As if you've got a rural area quite near a big city or town, then it does tend to become quite a smart area. And we have to remember, in the 19th century, of course, all this would be very, very different. It would have been farming village, and the land here is not brilliant, so it might have been quite a lot of rural poverty, very different from what we see today. There's the porch, and here's this lovely tower. Oh, it's very 15th century, so That then is St Leonard's, Clent, and the path between the yews winds up to the porch. So that's the way in St Leonard's, Clent. And so there we have it, St Leonard's, Clent, a lovely building not very far from Birmingham, but in this wonderful rural village, this picturesque setting in the hills. So thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.